Years ago, I had the opportunity to work in another country. I remember being struck by the number of employees I saw who were wheelchair bound. And it wasn't just on that job site, but at other places of business too, like restaurants. Shamefully, it made me realize how I had never really worked in environments where people with physical disabilities were largely included. Hi, I'm 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘲𝗀𝗀𝗃, and ever since that moment, I decided to start paying more careful attention to my surroundings, especially at a work site. And thanks to the new app Clubhouse, I even started listening in on conversations and learned so much about the broad spectrum of disabilities, as well as the false stereotypes in the workplace. And it made me realize how this segment of the working population is, in general, overlooked and underestimated. Think of all of that brain power that's largely going untapped. But hopefully that's going to change. As awareness increases, so will advocacy. All it takes is for each of us to listen, learn, and act. This is Season 12, Episode 145. Let's start the show.
Welcome to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues of fast-growing businesses. If you're a business owner or operator looking for practical tips and solutions to scaling your business in a sustainable manner, you're in the right place. Now here's your hostess, 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘲𝗀𝘀𝗀𝗃.
As your company scales, challenges emerge. You don't have the right data to power your business. The processes and software you used to rely on are slowing down your teams, and internal friction is starting to disrupt your ability to create exceptional customer experiences. When your systems are cobbled together, your data, channels, and teams are disjointed, which can overwhelm your operations team and hinder your customers' experiences. This season, we're tackling two areas affecting many business owners around the world, and that's diversity and digital transformation. And there's a lot to say about each of these topics, so we're going to see what we can accomplish in hopefully less than an hour. And I'm particularly excited about this episode today because for the first time ever, I have an insider joining me today, Mr. Gregory Brown. And Greg is also in Atlanta, Georgia. And Greg is very skilled at leveraging digital technologies to help you figure out how to streamline and automate your processes and your workflows and basically any component of your operations. Greg, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on today.
This is so exciting. And I just have a big cheesy grin on my face right now. I want to explain to people why I refer to you as an insider because, everyone, Greg is actually the web administrator for the businessinfrastructure.tv website. So the website that hosts this podcast, the videos on the YouTube channel, and other new media that we have on that website. Gregory is the person who is behind a lot of the really cool features that you see on that website. So, Greg, before we actually get into your technical acumen and all of the cool things that you help companies do to streamline their operations, I was wondering if we could first talk about you and your background. How did you develop this passion for technology, and what exactly would you say is your specialty?
I was about 7, 8 years old when my mom bought me my first computer. I actually took it apart, got in trouble, of course, because she was like, "You just got this and you're taking it apart." It was running slow to me. It wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. Got it, took it apart, was able to put it back together. It actually worked a lot better to me than what it was working. And from there on, I was the go-to tech guy in my house. From my mom, brother, sister, aunts, uncles, teachers, whatever. And it kind of just sort of stuck, to be honest with you. And it hasn't wore off yet. As you can see, I'm doing websites and other things now as well.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is your actual specialty? Because one thing that I came to appreciate when we first started working together is, when we talk about technology, that the field in and of itself is so vast. And I think for many of us, when we refer to technology now, we're really talking about digital technologies, and maybe even some hardware equipment here and there. But I think for the most part, a lot of people are referencing digital technologies, things that we use, software or phone-based, web-based apps. Would you say that's your specialty, or what exactly is your specialty?
I deal more in the software side of everything, but I think my specialty, to be honest with you, is kind of matching the situation with whatever tech needs to be there. I'm pretty much, I've been told I'm a liaison between the common person and technology. How can we merge those two together to give the average person what they actually need to get, whatever job or task they need to accomplish?
Now, what did you study in college? You went to Morehouse. And for those listening who aren't familiar with Morehouse is a very, very famous college, historically Black college and university here in the United States. It's where Martin Luther King Jr. went to college. So what did you study when you were at Morehouse?
My degree has nothing to do with being in technology, to be honest
I
with
know.
you.
That's why I wanted
African
you
American studies, but it had nothing to do with that. I've always was involved in computer science stuff while I was there, but I did not get my degree in it.
Why is that?
Honestly, Morehouse has a built-in math minor, and math is not necessarily my strongest suit. It takes me a lot longer to kind of process it than a regular semester. So going through the math minor along with the computer science at that time did not work for me. Now, more recently, they have a software development degree. Now, if I could go back, I would probably take that instead.
That's so interesting. Do you find that you've been able to leverage what your degree in African American studies with the work that you're doing now in the technology space?
In some ways, I have, because I've actually the writing portion of that degree. I did a lot of writing during that time period. It deals with the content marketing and things of that nature that I've done as well, or even looking at lines of code all the time, or reading a lot of the books and things that you need to actually read, or documentation for the coding or whatever I do.
I guess start to get into how you and I actually met, because people might be wondering, okay, well, if Greg, is the web administrator over, businessinfrastructure.tv, how did we meet? And we actually met through someone named Winston Oluwale. And Winston works for the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, which I had never heard of this organization, but it is an amazing organization, I must say. And the way I found out about it, Greg, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but I was working with a client last summer, so the summer of 2020. And we were both just saying, wow, we both need help. And, it was obvious that the pandemic wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. And we were starting to have this conversation around, the need to really ramp up our respective technology portfolios, because we had different things that we were leveraging, but it was kind of like a one-off here and there. And we realized, okay, we both realized the need to digitize our operations. And that's when she mentioned this agency. And I was like, well, I've never heard of it. So she put me in contact with Winston. And then Winston is the person who introduced us to each other. And so I was wondering if you wouldn't mind speaking a little bit more about the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency and just explaining what it is to our listeners.
Well, the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, it's put in place to help individuals, or mainly, honestly, vets with disabilities, but they do work with other individuals with disabilities as well. I first actually got involved with it after I graduated from high school. Someone recommended them to me for technical help and getting a job, as well as training for different things. And I've been involved with them on and off through the years, doing different things, finding jobs. I'm going through different trainings with them. Like, I've actually trained, I'm certified in Microsoft Office through them. I got certified, or I did a certification program with them for full stack development and other things of that nature. When they help you find jobs, or individuals that are companies that are looking for individuals with disabilities to work for them.
Mm. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit more about that piece, because when it comes
Mhm.
to diversity, Greg, I'm definitely not in a position to speak on this, but that's why I really thought it was so important for you to come on to be a voice for this group of people that honestly is often ignored, I think, in the conversation around diversity. And that is people who may have physical disabilities. Because usually when we hear about the conversation of diversity in the workplace, it's usually around race or gender, ethnicity, maybe even socioeconomic status. But it's very rare, I find, that people actually include physical disabilities or physical. I'm not even sure if I'm using the correct word here, so please forgive me if I'm not, but can you speak on that a little bit more? Has that also been something that you've found as well?
Honestly, I think people have a problem with kind of recognizing people that are different, not even with just physical, even some of the mental disabilities.
Yes.
I have a minor case compared to how bad it actually can get. And even say dealing with the vocational rehab. Honestly, even with them, you have individuals that don't truly understand what a disability is or how to advise a person with a disability.
Mm.
One of the counselors that I had during my time with working with vocational rehab, to be honest with you, if that was the first case that I had dealt with them, I wouldn't deal with them any longer.
Oh, wow.
He literally wanted to give me jobs or things that not impossible for me to do, but they were not something that I should be doing. As far as my disability is concerned, my
Mm.
disability affects mostly my right hand side, my right arm and my right leg. And this gentleman wanted me to work on the line at FedEx,
Oh, wow.
which is lifting boxes of 50, 60 pounds on average
Hmm.
for 8 to 12 hours a day. Not something that I'm going to typically be doing.
Right.
I'm more, I can lift that weight here and there, but I'm not going to do it 6, 7 days a week. And I'm not going to, I would rather use my brain, to be honest with you, and figure out how to solve that issue without me mainly doing labor. So that's with that. But in other jobs that I've had, even with them, they don't understand that I might not be able to do X, Y, and G job as fast as someone with both hands, both feet that are fine, that don't have any limitations that
Mm.
we can see doing them. I may have to figure out a different way to do it. Maybe a little bit slower, or maybe something that's not typical in that particular job that I may do. I may find a way to do it via applications or be it using other skills than what you would typically think this has been able to be done.
Well, this is interesting, Greg, because I'm learning so much because since we've known each other, we've never actually had this conversation. And it's making me realize I don't know if it's, well, first, I must tell you, I didn't even know. I didn't know, I truly didn't know until you happened to mention it just kind of in passing one day during a conversation that we had. And I was like, oh, okay. It didn't mean anything to me. It didn't, and let me explain what I mean when I say that. It didn't change anything for me because
Mm,
to me, you're still Greg, and this is a particular body of work that we agreed, that we would work on together or that you would kind of oversee. So whether you have a physical disability or not, it really didn't matter to me. And I'm wondering though, is the onus on us as team leaders, as business owners, should we be, maybe we don't even know how to broach the subject or ask the questions, how do we have that conversation, Greg, to understand what limitations may in fact exist?
Honestly, for me, I can't speak for every individual, but for me, I don't mind a question.
Okay.
I have a granddaughter. She's literally asked me literally every, let's say, 3, 4 months. She's asking me something about why can't I do this or how can I do this. And I've had other friends and people that get to know me I have had people, even, for example, my wife, she didn't broach the subject for it's about a year and a half before that I had known her. After knowing me, did she even ask what was going on? Because I'm not the type of person I'm going to just blatantly just put it out there. Oh, I have cerebral palsy. I have CP. This is what I can't do. This is what I'm not going to do. This, that, that. I was raised kind of to be like, this is a part of me, which you can do. I have that mentality. I probably can do it better. And I'm going to find a way to do it. You're not going to tell me. I like when people tell me I can't do anything or I can't do something, so that I'm going to prove you wrong just because I know I can. That's honestly, that's my mentality. And some people say that's bad way to be. Some people say that's a good way to be. But that's just me. I'm gonna find a way to prove you wrong. I like for you to tell me I can't do something. I can't figure out something.
And I think that's probably why we connected when we first met. We connected right away because I have a very similar mentality. But where does that come from? That can do it, stick to itiveness attitude that you have?
I can say part of it's my upbringing with my mom and stepfather. They kind of put that into me to where I had a PE coach one time. He would not let me go and run around with the other kids at gym time. He literally would have me sit on the sidelines because he didn't want me to get hurt. My mom went and had a meeting with this guy. And after the meeting, this guy, for the next couple of weeks, to be honest with you, this guy apologized to me just about every other day because my mom got on him about not letting me do anything. And from then on, I never had a problem with him. I had some problems with some other teachers, but for the most part, it got around to the rest of the school, and it kind of followed me through from, this was in elementary school, so middle school, high school, that type of thing. There were stories. They told my mom that I never would graduate from high school, or if I did, it would be because they pretty much passed me along.
Oh, wow.
I was never in any special ed classes through high school, from elementary through high school. I never received any services now through any of that as well. So when it got to be where I was in high school, I didn't necessarily sit in any classes. Let me say this. I went to classes, but for the most part, most of my teachers didn't have me sitting in classes on a regular basis. They had me doing special projects. They had me doing IT work for them. They had me putting together presentations for the principals. They had me putting presentations together for school board meetings, stuff like that. So I've always been that technical person that people went to.
And I would imagine that with your love of these digital technologies, combined with the fact that considering the mobility issues that you just described to us, with the right side of your body, I would imagine this is yet another reason why, you are so good at what you do when it comes to leveraging these digital technologies. And I would also imagine that because of what's happened as a result of the pandemics, with so many more people being open and receptive to remote work, I would imagine that you've seen some type of surge in demand for your services or the things that you can do for different companies and individuals as well. Have you found that to be true?
I have seen a raise in demand, to be honest with you, on different projects I'm working on, even the willingness to do remote work.
Yes.
To be honest with you, all of my jobs since I've graduated college, besides one, and I was actually working on campus for my college, have been pretty much remote work, which I've been blessed to be able to find those type things. But now it's becoming a lot easier because honestly, people don't care where you are now because it's not that big of a deal with the pandemic. They just want the work done.
Right.
And that kind of also leads to not as many questions asked about my disability and things of that nature. Because if you never see me, how do you know to ask those questions?
Exactly. That's how it was for us.
Yeah.
And this is probably going to sound really crazy to people because we're both in the Atlanta, Georgia area, but we've never seen each other in person. And And that's most of my team. I've I've never seen most of my team in person. Some of them are here locally, but and some obviously, are some people are in different countries, but we don't miss a beat. We keep things going. And that's actually, I want us to take a deeper dive into that, Greg, to talk specifically about some of the technologies that you recommend for your clients. We can even talk about technologies that we've used here, with the podcast and Equilibria, the company. Again, to just not miss a beat, pandemic or not, we can keep the train on the tracks. But first, why don't we go ahead and take a quick break? And when we come back, I definitely want to get into the specifics of the business infrastructure behind all of this, and how can we, those of us listening, how can we become more active in finding and seeking people who may have disabilities. It's yet another way of expanding your talent pool. But again, if we don't know where to go, then how can we know to actively solicit and recruit people? If we don't even know where to go. So let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that. All right. And we are back. So Greg, we were just starting to kind of talk a little bit more about how we can actually intentionally source people. And it's not that I always want to make sure that I'm very careful about this, because I have some of my friends who specialize in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I can see them right now just saying, Alicia, it's not about checking off boxes. And they're right. But I get so frustrated, Greg, and I don't know if you have experienced the same thing, when people say, well, we can't find them. We would hire certain people, but we just can't find them. So I want us to dispel that myth, particularly when it comes to, again, people who may have physical disabilities. So there may be someone listening right now who says, well, we never even really thought about that. That's a great point, but we don't know where to find people like that. So, but before we do, because I'd like to approach this from a business infrastructure perspective. And for those of you who are listening to this show for the first time, business infrastructure is a system for how you link your people, your processes, and your tools to ensure that growth in your company happens profitably and sustainably. So, Greg, aside from the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, can you share with us some other resources or places where people can visit or seek out to kind of break down these walls and these barriers when it comes to hiring people with physical disabilities?
There actually are companies that specialize in just that, helping their headhunters basically for individuals with disabilities.
Okay.
Or companies that work with that particular subset of people. One such is NCI. They work with individuals with disabilities. They do mainly call center type work.
Okay.
But they actually do work with individuals with disabilities. Then you have like Bender Consulting. They do a wide range of working with people with individuals with disabilities, such as if you're a programmer or if you have specialized skill sets, things of that nature. They can go into, they help individuals with those types.
I'm sorry, Greg. What was Benson? How do you spell that?
Bender.
Oh, Bender.
Bender.
Oh, okay. Consult. Okay. Sorry about that.
There are groups on Facebook. There are groups on Instagram, Twitter that actually deal with individuals with disabilities. Honestly, some of your job boards actually have places for individuals with disabilities as well. You can open up your employment pool to individuals with a Schedule A. And what a Schedule A is based, well, Schedule A is more for government work, but an individual has a Schedule A, they have a disability, and it helps kind of deal with the, I'm not going to say fast tracking, but it kind of keeps them in the game when it comes to the process for government contracts and things like that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Honestly, there's a lot out there. Honestly, you can Google a lot of this stuff. Companies that work with individuals with disabilities, the Social Security Administration has lists on their website for individuals with disabilities, companies that work with individuals with disabilities that you can pull down and actually in your local area.
You know, we had a guest on a couple of episodes ago, Jesse Torres, and
Mm,
he was talking specifically about these different government type programs, but from
mm,
the perspective of, programs that oftentimes entrepreneurs and small business owners don't realize exist because the government, as he put it, is horrible at marketing. And so a
very.
lot of times these programs and the capital that's been allocated, the financial resources that have been allocated to those programs goes untapped because people don't know about them. So that's why, what you're sharing with us right now is so important because just in you mentioning the Social Security Administration, I would not have thought to go there. I'm just being perfectly honest. I would not have even thought, and that's a
Hmm.
government, here in the US, that's a government resource for us. And I would imagine, to your point, Greg, that for those who are listening that might be in other countries, hopefully you can also do a similar search online for organizations that might be government sponsored type organizations or just maybe even nonprofits and other, there might also be some for-profit organizations out there that you might be able to tap into. So you also mentioned something earlier that I want to make sure we give some attention to, and that is that you found that I think you were mentioning one of the first people that you interacted with at the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, it wasn't a great experience. Or that sometimes you may, even on other jobs that you may have had, there were certain expectations or certain, you were asked or tasked to do certain things that you just maybe couldn't do. What is that, an HR issue? How do we even approach something like that?
It is an HR issue, somewhat. It's more of you have to advocate for yourself.
Mm,
HR, I found in some jobs, to be honest with you, HR don't know a hill of beans, to be honest with you.
mm,
So you have to actually kind of educate them as well. I've had jobs to where they'll know the law, but they won't follow the law. Knowing the Disability Act, that's super important. You have to know what you can do, the individual, and what they can do lawfully.
mm-hmm.
Because some of the jobs, to be honest with you, would try to do things that are not lawful at all. So I've had them try to take breaks that they couldn't take away from me.
Mm,
I've had them to um, tell me I can't schedule off for a doctor's appointment because of certain things. Uh, they people will fluff the law to their favor whenever they think they can fluff the law to their favor. So it's
mm,
important for that individual with the disability to know what's available for them, know that they do have options, especially now with us being in a remote first environment.
mhm.
We're becoming more a mobile environment than anything else. I honestly think, not that I like the pandemic, to be honest with you, I don't, but I'm glad in some aspects that it happened because it's gotten the average person to realize, no, I don't have to sit in a desk right there in front of you for you to know that I'm working.
Right.
Or I can get things done, or you can get someone from, let's say we're in Georgia, so someone in California working on your team,
Mhm.
and they can do that. You can get the best person for the job instead of having to be reliant on location dependency to find quality people. So I'm definitely enjoying that because I can work with teams from everywhere,
Mhm.
even across the globe. So that's the good thing. Another place that I didn't mention that I wanted to mention to you earlier, you can actually even go to some of these colleges, to be honest with you. All colleges should have a disability services office.
Hmm.
And what that is basically is a office within the college that deals with those students that have disabilities. And what they're tasked with doing is making the classes accessible for those students. Like maybe if the technology isn't there, if they need someone to take notes in that particular class, or if they need a tutor for that class or something of that nature.
Mhm.
Or also within finding employment. Sometimes they actually do work with different companies to help find summer employment for those kids and they teach them etiquette within the business world. Because business acumen for someone with a disability is not different, but there are different things that you may have to do. Like, because as you know, with a business dinner or luncheon or whatever, there's certain way that you're supposed to act, certain things you're supposed to do. Well, what if you can't necessarily do those things? Like, I can't go out and order a steak necessarily at a business dinner because I can't necessarily cut it. But I can order a steak because what I would do in that case is I would pull the waiter or waitress to the side and say, can you have this cut in the back for me? Or can you have this done this particular way for me? Because I need that. Don't be afraid to ask for those things for those individuals that need it.
So what I'm hearing is, use your voice, stand up for yourself, and know your rights.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah. Wow. And it's interesting because that's what everyone so far on the podcast who's come on this season has said, again, from each person's unique vantage point. And it's funny how we're all kind of landing at the same place. Use your voice, know your rights, and stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
Let's get into the process piece of business infrastructure, Greg, because this is certainly where we spent a lot of time together, painful times trying to figure out some of the best technologies to leverage. But I was wondering if you could recommend, just very generically, an approach that you would take for those who are listening. And I can chime in just from personal experience and how we had to maneuver around some of these different technologies. But it's one thing that I learned also as a result of the pandemic is the importance of making sure that whichever technologies you start to leverage or utilize, to make sure that it integrates and plays nicely with other technologies that you're using, because otherwise it will just be an absolute nightmare. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. There's a couple. I'll start with the actual software. Like I use, or one of the softwares that I recommend to you was Notion.
Yes.
Now, Notion is pretty much a platform where you can a database. You can do simple databases. You can do task lists. You can do pretty much anything in there that you really want to do. Now, it doesn't integrate with everything off the bat. Now, there are some softwares and things of that nature it does integrate with, and some of the main things that you would use with. But you might need to use other things like if then that. Those things help as well. Or so you have to look at how you're going to automate those systems. How do you want to use it, first of all? Once you get how you want to use it, what tools are you going to put around those tools to make that shine? It's like building a team. You have your star player, then you have your supporting cast. With your supporting cast, you figure out what different role is each piece going to have, and how do they play with your starting player.
I love that analogy, your star player and your supporting cast. So if I may, if I could just share with everyone how we landed on Notion. We had, using a combination of external hard drives, Dropbox. Then we tried to upgrade to Dropbox for Business so that we could have a team account. That proved disastrous. Dabbled in SharePoint, Google Drive. It was a mess. We had like 4 or 5 different ways that we were storing and trying to share information with each other. And remember, sometimes you would try to send things, very large files to me via WeTransfer, which is a great tool. But, it just got to the point where it was so much work trying to figure out the best storage solution to keep all of our work in one place so that we could truly collaborate. And then when you told me about Notion, here's what I can say for Notion. Notion replaced all of those other things. It replaced the need for Dropbox. It replaced the need for Google. So to your point, Greg, it doesn't necessarily integrate with maybe some of the other things that we're using, but it is definitely the star player because now everything goes in there and it's so visual. And I hope one day maybe you and I, we can do like some type of demo video where we can show people all of the really cool things that they can do with Notion. So shout out to Notion. Another thing, another pain point, if you'll recall, that we had was selecting the best CRM. So when you first joined the team, we had a combination of Outlook and some spreadsheets. And then we started using Zoho Begin. And then we quickly realized the limitations of that. And then Monique started to explore HubSpot. You were starting to look into HubSpot and you were like, yep, 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘂𝗀, that's the way you should go. And then as fate would have it, the podcast is now officially a part of the HubSpot podcast network. So, so that all worked out really nicely. But I guess too, in a way, HubSpot is also a star player because we have all of these other things that can connect to it, the supporting cast, as you call it. So just to reiterate, Greg, your process, you said, look at what you want and how you want to use a particular technology, right?
Or what you may need.
What you need.
Yeah. You have to figure out what goal are you trying to accomplish and what's your end game. Definitely maybe the best way to say it.
Okay.
And then how can I get there? You have to work backwards from your end game. Because your goal is to get your podcast out.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to get your podcast out? What tools do you need to be able to do that? So you may need 5, 6 different tools on a regular basis.
Right.
So you figure out what tools those are going to be. There's hundreds of thousands of tools for each one of those slots. But all of those tools don't play well together. Mm-hmm. Some of those tools only work by themselves. Some of those tools work with 2 or 3 different other tools. So once you go down that track, what will work with the most things? Or if you need to pivot, like we've had to pivot before,
mm-hmm.
what will allow you to pivot and not have to switch up your whole starting 6 or whatever, how many tools you're using.
Right. And that makes sense because I know a lot of times especially when we first started working together, I would tell you, Greg, things were just, I was in such a frazzled state because there were so many things going on all at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And it's scary because I didn't know how to describe certain things to you. And thankfully we have tools like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Skype where you can share your screen. And now that I'm listening to you and I reflect back on the beginning when we first started working together, and you would always ask, okay, well, what is it that you're trying to do? Tell me what you ultimately are looking for. And then I'll go and find the technologies that can help make that happen. And here's something else, everyone, for those of you listening who are not maybe the most technologically savvy in terms of digital technologies, it takes a long time to figure this stuff out. Wouldn't you agree with that? Yeah, Greg, because you have to test everything out and you're not going to always get it right the first time around. I'll not to pick on Dropbox for Business, but there were certain things, even with all of us that were doing research on Dropbox for Business, it wasn't until we actually started using it that we realized its limitations and the fact that it like connected to each of your accounts. And then I had to release your account back to it was crazy. It was absolutely.
It was something with each tool. They're going to have their own nuances because
Mm-hmm.
they want to lock you into their tool. They want to make sure that you're using their tool. So even with some of the tools that I love, I know, okay, I'm either going to be locked into this tool or I'm going to have to find something to replace this tool, or it may make this tool not in my starting 5, but maybe my 7 or 8 off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Because it may have some nuances in there that I don't particularly like, or that I'm not going to go to as much because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole to where I'm losing information or I'm having to reproduce more information than I'm actually using on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So Dropbox was one of those tools that it intertwined everything together. You had control of things, unfortunately, that you didn't necessarily need control over. So, like my personal files from videos from reunions and things that I've done in the past, that's honestly that has nothing to do with equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't have been something that I would have gave you control over. But because my Dropbox account was attached to your account, you had control over everything. That's not good on a business thing because anything can happen. We can decide to go our separate ways. We can something can happen to where you no longer have access to your account, whatever. And there's no other way to get rid of that particular. There's no backdoor into solving that issue.
Right.
Even with talking to Dropbox, you just have to be careful. And sometimes you have to ask questions that you're not going to necessarily think of it off rip. That's why the trials are immensely important.
Mm-hmm.
You get in and play with the tool, see, take it, test drive it to its fullest, just like you test drive a car before you get it. Test drive it to its fullest. You're gonna punch the gas. You're gonna turn this knob. You're gonna push this button. You want to see what everything does, because when you do that, then you can say, okay, this may work, this may not work. Okay, this is the tool. We even went through another tool before we chose Notion.
Oh, ClickUp.
That was a good tool.
Mm-hmm.
It is a good tool, but it depends on what you're trying to do with ClickUp, though.
Exactly.
You have to put everything in its place. So that's how I look at it. What are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? What's your most important thing to accomplish? Are you looking at cost? Are you looking at time? Are you looking at how efficient it is or easy it is?
Mm-hmm.
And what makes the most sense for you?
Yes, absolutely. And so getting into the final portion of business infrastructure, that last element, and which is the tools piece. And you've already mentioned so many, Notion. We talked about CRMs like HubSpot and ClickUp. And do you have any other tools or technologies that are some of your favorites, Greg, that you highly recommend to listeners? Maybe not necessarily industry specific technologies, but what are some things out there that you really like that you yourself use and that you can personally vouch for that might also help us streamline the way we're doing certain things?
Okay, I'll give you a couple. First, I'm gonna say I am on mainly a Mac or Apple ecosystem.
Okay.
So most of the tools that I use are Apple ecosystem, or some of them have counterparts within the PC or other platform world. One of my most important tools, to be honest with you, is an app called Draft. Now that's a app to be able to jot down notes, pull things together. Like when we were having meetings, I would jot down notes in there. One of the things I really like for this particular app is it has a part where I can capture, and that capture it puts it on top of all of my other windows. Literally, it's gonna
Mm-hmm.
pull it on top of all the other windows, so it stays there. So it's literally like a little notepad that literally goes from if I pull up a Word document, then I pull up my Internet Explorer or my browser. It's all of that stuff, and that's literally going to stay on top. It's not going to move from wherever I put it. So I
Mm.
can literally just tap in it, jot what I need to, go on. That's one I use all the time. I use an app called Paste. Paste is to copy and paste, to be honest with you. Whatever I need to copy and paste, I always just copy it and it keeps it in a clipboard for me. I can actually even organize those things so I keep them long term as well. What else is it that I use up here? Of course, Dropbox and those things as well. I like Pocket. If I'm reading an article or if I see an article that I don't necessarily have time to just read right now,
Mm-hmm.
I have a link in my browser that I can actually hit. That's my Pocket, stored in there. And I can read it later. I can read it on my iPad, my phone, whatever.
Mm.
What else is in here that I use a
Now, is
lot?
that browser specific Pocket?
I know Pocket is on, I know I can use it on Google Chrome. I
Okay.
know I can use it on Safari. I think I can use it on Firefox as well. think I have used it on Firefox as well. But you also, and there's some other tools like that. What is the other one? 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗶𝗲𝗀, I think it's called. That's another one that's similar to that one. Then I use, of course, Slack is a good one that I always have.
Mm-hmm.
Communication wise. I use, of course, Notion. I use Evernote sometimes as well. I store a lot of my own personal files in there as far as links to my LinkedIn and things of that nature. I may use that for. And let's see what else up here I have that may be good. Bartender. Bartender is a organizer for the top of your computer, where you would have like the time, the date, what applications you have open, things like that. It helps you organize those things. What else those are some of the key ones that I use on a daily basis.
Those are great.
Freely to store RSS feeds for articles I'm reading, in industry stuff like that. Those are main ones I would recommend for business owners, things of that nature.
That's great. And there was just to, speaking of different tools and technologies and resources, you did mention a Disability Act. I want to make sure I got the name of that correct. Was it the Northern Disability Act?
It's ADA.
American Disability. Okay, yes.
Act.
Okay, yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. Okay. Well, Greg, we're almost at an hour. I don't know if you realize that, but that's been the beautiful thing about these interviews this particular season. Everyone just kind of lights up because you're talking about things that you're obviously very passionate about. But how can people get in touch with you? Those who are listening and they're like, Greg really knows his stuff, and I like that can-do attitude that he has, and I'd like to see how we might be able to do some things together. How can people get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. My handle on LinkedIn is GQBrown07. And you would just put that after the LinkedIn.com/GQBrown07. That's one place I'm on. I'm also on Twitter at GQBrown_PR.
PR? Like P like Paul?
Papa Romeo.
Papa Romeo. Okay. All right, Greg.
But this is for public relations, pretty much is what it stands
okay,
for.
Okay.
No, I did the phonetic spelling. That's why I told you Papa Romeo.
Okay, well, Greg, what I'd like to do is just kind of quickly recap some of the things that you shared with us, coming from your perspective as it relates to diversity as well as digital transformation. This was absolutely phenomenal. I knew it would be. First, you started off sharing with us your background. And I love when you said that whatever you can do, I can probably do it better. And, just asking you, where does that mindset come from? And I love the story that you shared about your mom and how she was told that you would never graduate from high school without special assistance, but you, in fact, did graduate, never having set foot in a special education course. So shout out to Mom.
Not only that, I have a college degree as well. So.
And you have absolutely, yes, your college degree from the Morehouse College. So yeah, we definitely have to make sure we give Morehouse a shout out as well. Again, just some of the things that really stood out for me in this conversation, Greg, is again, use your voice, know your rights, and stand up for yourself. I think that's so important. And the fact that you mentioned some of these different government programs, different acts, legal acts that are out there in place. And again, for those who are listening and you may not be in the United States, definitely do a Google search. It all ties back to those three things: knowing your rights, standing up for yourself, and using your voice. But you're able to use your voice and stand up for yourself when you are in fact educated about the rules and the laws that are in place to protect you and shield you from certain abuses that can definitely take place in the workplace. I appreciate you sharing with us some of the resources that you recommended, Greg, such as Bender Consulting, and you mentioning the Schedule A if you're in particular looking to do government contract type work, also the Social Security Administration, and then just switching gears a little bit toward the digital transformation piece. the process that you kind of walked us through, that you always take, the approach that you take with your clients and asking them, what goal are you trying to accomplish? What's your end game? And then from there, working backwards, always making sure you sign up for a trial version and really test it, that the trial version of whatever application you're considering investing in, testing it to the fullest extent. That way you want to try to quote unquote break it, I guess, to see what
the wheels fall off.
Yes. But I really like how you described it as, which of your technologies, you have all of this technology stack, right? Which of those are your star players versus what is the supporting cast, knowing which role each technology has to play. This was fantastic, Greg. I'm so glad we were able to make this interview happen. If you want more details about Greg and how he might be able to help you streamline your operations with different digital technologies, make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn as well as Twitter. Again, his handle on LinkedIn is 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘲𝘀07. And on Twitter, 𝗕𝘂𝘀�brown_Paul_Romeo, PR. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Now, everyone, don't forget to check out businessinfrastructure.tv. That's where you'll see a lot of Greg's handiwork. Greg added this feature where you can easily search the website. So you can click on that magnifying glass icon when you get to businessinfrastructure.tv, type in Greg's name, Greg Brown, and you will see this episode along with links to all of the resources that Greg has shared with us. But the only place you're going to be able to get that information is, again, at businessinfrastructure.tv. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being a loyal subscriber. Oh, and I have to say, please make sure you support our sponsors, because when you support them, it helps us keep this show free for you. So again, thank you for tuning in and for being a loyal subscriber. Remember, stay focused, be encouraged. This entrepreneurial journey is a marathon and not a sprint. Until the next time.
Thank you for listening to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues with 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘀. If you like what you've heard, do us a favor and subscribe, leave a rating and review, and more importantly, share with your colleagues and team members who could benefit from the information. Join us next week for another episode of Business Infrastructure with 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘀𝘀𝗶𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂